When Llywelyn ap Gruffydd, Llywelyn the Last, became sole ruler of Gwynedd in 1255, one of the first things he did was not reform the laws or get married or retake lands to the east, which he did. No, he had something much more important to do. He set up a Dominican friary in Bangor to compete with the Diocese of Bangor, which had English spies within it. I'm Benjamin Angwin, and today I want to talk about how Wales was really conquered. This was not quite a feat of military achievement, though it was. The actual war was much more discreet. Now, for you to understand this, there are 4 words I need you to understand. First, mendicant. In this specific context, it's friars, religious men who wander around the countryside begging for money. Okay? You need to understand that because that's part of what led to the downfall of Gwynedd. Second, a diocese. Now I know in our modern culture we've basically abandoned God and let our culture decay into nihilistic atheism, so we don't know a lot about these basic religious terms. A diocese is simply a territory within the administrative system of a religious institution. Here, I've got a religious district. Each Christian sect or even monastic order within these have dioceses. So even different Christian sects can have dioceses that overlap each other and compete with each other, which was causing problems in the lands of Gwynedd. Third, the Cistercians. This was a monastic order, and they were very fiercely local and interested in self-rule. And this was very enticing to the Welsh rulers because they could bring in these Cistercians and they minded their own business and actually encouraged local rulers independent of empires like the Kingdom of England next door. And they had constitutions declaring their independence, these Cistercians. Very useful for the Welsh. The 4th word is the Dominicans. Now these are an order, and they a monastic, not quite a monastic order, but mendicants. These Dominicans wander from place to place begging for money, and they move into a territory, basically sap what they can, begging, and then move on. And they're very preachy, smug. At least they were in this time. I'm not insulting like the Dominican Republic. Thomas Aquinas, I think he was a Dominican. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. A very influential thinker. So you need to know these 4 words, okay? Now for the sake of Wales, and this is important, the Norman Conquest, which slowly became the English Conquest, took over 2 centuries with Wales. It wasn't like the Spanish rocking up in Mexico and being like, kill the big guy and then just take over in a day. No, this took 2 centuries, an initial onslaught from the Normans, then the Welsh resurged in the middle of the 12th century and held a line that became Pure Walia, pure Wales, Latin, a different meaning than purity of the modern post-war nonsense. Now, in the 13th century, the Cistercians were kind of overtaken. During the reign of Llywelyn the Great, things in the ecclesiastical sense were changing, and the Dominicans moved in and began to take over. Not take over in terms of government, but the influence, and in many cases the funding. Okay. Now, as far as these Cistercians go, I actually have a list here that I need to read out because this was big in the 12th century, right? So beginning with, Castell-Nedd, I think that was 1147. Then Stradflyr in Ceredigion, Strata Florida, founded by Arglwydd Rhys, the Lord of Rhys, of Deheubarth. Strata Marchell, 1170, founded by Owen Cyfeiliog, the ruler of Powys. Cwmhir, in 1176, founded by Cywallan Madog of Melionydd. Llantanar, 1179, founded by Hwyl Bjorwerth of Caerllion, far to the southeast, so all over Wales, not just Pure Walia. Cwmer, Griffith ap Cynon, Lord of Merionydd, and Velacrucis, which it's got a beautiful Welsh name, Abboti Glyn Agroes. He set that up in 1201. Founded by Madog ap Gruffydd of Mylor. And you'll notice that these are all within about 40 years of each other, and every single major Welsh dynasty incorporated these Cistercians into their religious institutions, their ecclesiastical power, and that was because of what was going on in the four main dioceses. So you had Bangor, right in the heart of Gwynedd, which would cause problems later. Llandaff in Cardiff. Tyddewi, far to the southwest, which a lot of political stuff went on there in trying to wrestle Welsh power away from the Archbishop of Canterbury. And a lot of literature was written in Welsh as well, but mostly Latin, I think. And you had Llanelwy in, I think it's Dyffryn Clwyd up. It's in the north, sort of the north central to northeast. These were all under the hand of, or control of, the Archbishop of Canterbury, because that was an ecclesiastical province of the entire Catholic Church, which is very dangerous for the Welsh princes, because if you went against that, well, during the exact time we're thinking of, going into the 13th century, there were crusades in Prussia, in Finland, in Estonia, in Czech lands there was issues. Not just the pagans, but in the fringes of Eastern Europe, where they were worried that these smaller kingdoms would break away from the major Catholic powers. The major powers could appeal to the Pope for a crusade, and the Welsh princes did not want that, because that would have been the end. This meant that essentially, through the influence of the King of England in Canterbury, he could have Welsh rulers excommunicated. Now, this was not an easy thing to do. You had to have due reason and clear evidence. And in 1231, Llywelyn ap Iorwerth, Llywelyn the Great, was on the warpath, going south into, I think, was it toward Caerphilly in the Welsh valleys. And, you know, when you fight a war, stuff gets burned down, man. Like, it's just going to happen. Like, you're at war. And some religious lands got really badly damaged, and that helped England to excommunicate him, or to have him excommunicated through the Archbishop in Canterbury. And then Henry III, King of England, was able to have more favorable terms for extracting peace from Llywelyn the Great, which is exactly what happened in exchange for that excommunication being absolved, or at least suspended. Now his grandson, Llywelyn Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, was also excommunicated. You see where this is going. It's a trend. You have a new ruler, you have someone who consolidates territory, and the English crown is going to use that as a weapon against them. And so King Edward came to the throne, and he was not a really friendly guy. I mean, this guy had serious daddy issues, right? And there was a war in 1277. Edward reduced Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, Llywelyn the Last, to the lands west of Avon Conwy, the river Conwy. And he used this threat of excommunication, which he inflicted upon Llywelyn ap Gruffudd through the church, basically. And he was forced to sign a treaty in terms of peace that was very favorable to Edward. And this was kind of the beginning of the end, because at this point, the English had finally caught on. Before this, the Welsh were always like kind of almost 2 steps ahead of the English in terms of the war within the church, because they kept using different religious orders and outmaneuvering the English. But eventually the English kind of got the point, and they were like, well, we have the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Bangor is in the middle of their territory. We have this 5th column, spies that we can put into their kingdom and destroy it from within. And that's really what began to happen. Now, there was this Archbishop, John Peckham. I mean, this guy was a horrible person. Horrible. If I went back in time, I don't know if I could restrain myself from punching this guy in the face. I mean, he hated the Welsh. He hated the mere existence of Welsh laws. I think he criticized the Welsh language. He wanted to erase all Welsh institutions, essentially. And he understood how to use the church to begin weakening Wales from within. He was the first archbishop who truly understood the power in his hand and what he could do to Wales with it. It just so happened that he was a 4-letter word. And so, between 1277 and 1282, he was working tirelessly. He went to Gwynedd, and in the First War, there was this guy named Annian. Okay, this guy was Bishop of Bangor, and he fled to Rhuddlan and then further east to join the English. But before, he had been a staunch ally of Llywelyn, but I guess he had a change of heart. He joined the English crown, essentially, and despite that, though, he had a falling out, we think, with John Peckham, the Archbishop, and the Archbishop, realizing how useful this man was to the cause of wiping Wales off the map, went all the way to Bangor under the pretext of getting good relations back with Llywelyn, which he kind of did a bit, though they soured very quickly, which I'll get to in a minute. But he met up with Annian, this bishop, during that time, and made amends, and it looks like they were making plans of some kind. We don't have any evidence, other than they were always in the same places at the same time in peculiar points. Whether it was Rhuddlan, Bangor, or London. 2 men of that station in that era at that particular time being in the same place at the same time 3 times as Wales was being conquered is a bit auspicious. When John Peckham, Archbishop, got back to England, he sent a letter to Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, basically trying to provoke him, his anger. He's telling him that English law was fully applicable to be applied on the borderlands and in the Pefeddwlad, the land that Llywelyn had taken back. You see what's going on. John Peckham went to Bangor, formed alliances with people who were looking to betray their prince, and then began intentionally trying to provoke Llywelyn into a war, which he astutely avoided. He saw what was going on. It wasn't stupid. If you look at what he did in his life, he was trying to focus on the economics, to move towns further east, to build a population center. But the English were focused on the church and waging a war that way, which is why he set up the Dominican friary almost immediately on the hill in Bangor, looking down upon the cathedral in the little valley. The Bangor Cathedral's in a valley, and the friary's on the hill, where you can see down onto it. Now, John Peckham must have had this work ready. What he did next, he almost immediately, I think it was 10 days after David, the brother of Llywelyn, attacked in the east on Sul y Bloda, Palm Sunday, beginning the revolt. He had all Welsh rebels excommunicated. Now this must have had groundwork laid already, because he did it so fast. And then as soon as Llywelyn ap Gruffudd moved to defend his own brother, then John Peckham had him excommunicated, as the war began in 1282. Now, we don't have much tystiolaeth, much evidence. Most of the records on the Welsh side were, of course, burned by the victor. Why wouldn't you? But we do have a few minor notes written after by Welsh people. Brwd y Tywysogion, the Chronicles of the Welsh Princes. There's a single line of an event that happened at Bangor. It's in medieval Welsh, so I'm going to have to read this. Ag yna treiglwyd brad Llywelyn ymhorth mair ym Mangor, gan I wir I hun. Which means, and then Llywelyn was betrayed in the belfry of Bangor by his own men. Now the belfry, that's the bell tower, right? Ymhorth, a belfry. So in the door, that can only mean the cathedral. There was some kind of plot against Llywelyn rooted in the church. And Llywelyn was killed. You know, this is chaos. Wales, or Gwynedd, is a tiny kingdom compared to England at that time, which stretched from the lowlands of Scotland all the way to the south of France. I mean, this was crazy. For him to stand with his brother was bravery, courage. But most of the war had already been fought. And yet, it looks like Llywelyn had a little plan up his sleeve. On his body was found a letter, which Peckham describes as having read. So we don't have the letter itself, but we know it existed. And Peckham would have been very eager to get rid of this, because it seemed to suggest that Llywelyn was in contact with nobles under King Edward and was staging some type of conspiracy to have an uprising of nobles and kill King Edward. We don't know. What we do know is King Edward rewarded Anjan, the Bishop of Bangor, very well. He didn't just give him a nice house. He gave him some of the best real estate in all of Wales. He gave him an estate on a Gogarth above Llandudno and a nice fat paycheck. And the Cistercians at Aberconwy. Abbotty Aberconwy is the Welsh name. There's a lot of Abba. I haven't heard an ABBA song in a long time. But Aberconwy. Do you hear my next door neighbor? Aberconwy was forcefully relocated into basically the fortress, the castle, and the Cistercians were not abolished, but just kind of given new masters. And the key to understanding how important this change between Cistercians and Dominicans is that the Dominicans are really the only institution of the Welsh princes that survives outside true control of the English king. Yes, they're answerable to them, sort of, but by papal decree and right, they can go where they wish. And this is important for two different reasons. Well, we can look back and see, why did the Welsh princes shift from having their own diocese under the independence-loving Cistercians to the roaming Dominicans? Well, remember that period of about 40 years when all these abbeys were set up? Those were basically independent dioceses were being set up by the Welsh princes. So by the time we get to Llywelyn the Great, and after him, the chaos of the years after his death, those institutions have already been set up, and that framework of having independent Welsh territories, dioceses, sort of, have already been set up. It's just that the ecclesiastical province in its diocese, controlled by England, is a layer on top. Both of these dioceses are living side by side and on top of each other. In addition to Welsh royal lands, marcher lordships, and various Welsh princes around the fringes of Gwynedd. And so in come the Dominicans, who don't really believe in national borders, right? Who have a papal right to come and go as they please across royal lines, across diocese lines, I don't know what the adjective is, ecclesiastical lines, across lordships, across languages. And this is incredibly useful for the princes of Gwynedd, because how do you fight back against Bangor being directly in the middle of your kingdom, being essentially controlled by your enemy? Well, the Dominicans gave you that answer. That's why he put them on the hill above the cathedral, and over in Llanelwy, he opened up another friary, kind of to watch his enemies in their heart, in their seats of ecclesiastical control. And these friars, they were grey friars essentially, they could go where they wished, and the English couldn't stop them. So if you wanted information, you could send these grey friars over to Worcester or Chester and have them spy on the English. It's incredibly clever, and the English couldn't do anything about it. This must have infuriated them. But neither could they wipe out these mendicants, these wandering friars, when they conquered Wales, because that would be an attack upon the Pope. So they survived. Too much light. And so, what we have in the decades after, we have the poetry of David ap Gwilym, who was writing, singing, I think, kind of between the 1320s and 1340s, at the latest, probably. We think he died in the Black Death, I think. Or more than one wave of that swept through. And he's talking about these grey friars, these priggish, self-righteous, holier than thou, wandering from place to place, begging without contributing anything. And if you want to understand how and why Wales was conquered, it's quite simple. The Cistercians contributed. They built. They facilitated local government and assisted local rulers. They helped grow a state. They laid the foundations of a Welsh state. By turning to the Dominicans, the Welsh princes made a fatal mistake, because the basis of these Dominicans, at least at that time, and you can see this in the right, I think it's Thomas Aquinas, the philosopher, theologian of that order. I think he's of that order. He lived in that time. And they're very, it's like a hen pecking grain. Just pecking, criticizing. Kind of like, well, exactly like, and this is what I'm getting to, very much like the nagging social justice warriors of our time who just want to make you feel guilty about everything. Don't really have anything to create. They just want to pull everything down and nag you about social justice issues and tell you that you've sinned, that you're a bad person for not being as holy and righteous as me. That's what these Grey Friars were like, whilst also sapping the money out because they went around begging and preaching in the open air about the most depressing nonsense you can imagine. And if you look at the poetry of Candelu Prydydd Mawr in the century before, Hwla Bowan, there's light, there's joy, there's an audacious boldness. Even the religious poetry is different. But as you get toward the end of Llywelyn the Great, something is changing. The optimism is fading, and as you get into the early reign of Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, Llywelyn the Last, there's this mendicious religious element, whereas before the religious element was quite joyful, which is adding to a society, which is giving people comfort in their time of need. This religious element is turning towards like this vengeful kind of sin. I'm going to open the window. There's so many clouds in Wales, it just changes the light so much. So as you get towards the end of that rule of Llywelyn the Last, the preachiness, the smugness of this Dominican order is quite evident even in the poetry. And if you ask me how was Wales conquered, it was a twofold prong within the church. One, your enemy could use the main ecclesiastical institution at Bangor to plant plots within your heart and stab you from within, as we saw at Bangor in the Belfry, I don't know. But also, they chose an order of monks who weren't there to build anything. They were just there to complain and take money from people. Much like the social justice losers of our day. I mean, what do they contribute to Wales? Have they built businesses? Have they laid down a plan for Welsh independence that does not include just taking from those who dream and giving to those who just sit there and do nothing? No. They complain about your sin. And if you look at Welsh history, it looks like we're repeating that mistake. Which is why I don't think Welsh independence is going to win, at least in this form. I'm not saying it can't win. I'm saying that smug, priggish, self-righteous, holier-than-thou attitude is exactly what destroyed Wales in the first place. And so you can't build a new Wales by re-engaging in the same trivialities that destroyed you in the first place. Now, I'm sure some people will think that's pessimistic, but I'm rather optimistic, because the Cistercians showed how you can combine ethics whilst building and declaring independence. They had their own constitutions declaring independence. That is also when the Welsh princes were at their height. And I think we should learn from that. Because when you see these protests, like the especially the Palestinian hatred stuff, all the placards, a lot of them are the same, and the people have new shoes on. A lot of these people are paid. This is a fifth column. It couldn't be more obvious. Don't be so naive to believe that all these pious social justice warriors are working for the interests of your country, or are not just the useful idiots that happened in a similar vein in the lands of Gwynedd in the 13th century. There were a lot of useful idiots that helped England conquer this land. And the root of that idiocy was a holier-than-thou social justice attitude, which people felt, oh, I'm being a good person. Learn from history. Wales was not conquered by military means. That was just the inevitable last push of a war that had happened within morality, under the guise of being moral anyway, within the ecclesiastical institutions. Let me know what you thought about that below. By the way, I'm getting a graphics card, which is why I'm doing this. I want to do a video in the Ligurian language, but I need to speed up my computer a bit. So if you've got anything to donate to the channel, please do so. Diolch yn fawr iawn am wylio. Thank you very much for watching. What was that?